gameplay. You only have to type in !May 18 once. There's no spaces between them. Just in case, I saw a number of people putting a space. But only once, please. We do want to see the questions you guys have in general. Someone asked if I enjoyed my break. I had a fantastic time. How about you?
I just sat here in blind panic.
Okay, cool. So
thanks.
you seem cool, calm, and collected now, so it's all good. Okay, guys, so we're going to quickly give you guys a look at some gameplay footage that we recorded yesterday in Engine, and Steven's just going to walk us through it and give a little bit of insight.
Sure, I did my very best. I saw it being recorded yesterday. Okay, so in here, I believe this was Yuri flying the Mirage, the PA-46, around, if I remember correctly, he's flying in Scotland, in what looks like lovely flying conditions. He always likes to dial that up. So in here, this is quite cool because you can see the detail in the cockpit. I mean, this aircraft is particularly beautiful. If I had the money in my account, it may be one aircraft I would love to purchase, but we have to live with that fantasy. We'll see how well FSW does. Flight Sim World, if that does well, maybe I can get a couple of these, or not. But the detail in the cockpit is awesome. So when we talk about trying to faithfully recreate these aircraft, this is a great example. Not just the interior and the cockpit and the detail and the systems, but the exterior. And I think it works incredibly well with the new rendering options that we've incorporated into Flight Sim World. That sits quite nicely. I like that. You can choose from 7 different aircraft. This is a very fast aircraft, the Mirage. Actually, one thing I noticed a lot of the developers doing when we first incorporated this was really struggling to slow the aircraft down. It is a very slippery machine, and you always find people doing go-arounds and just missing their approach completely. So he's flying in poor conditions in Scotland, not representative of what it's like in Scotland at all times, but he likes to dial up the effects here. So it looks like he's coming in on a subtle approach with he's lowering his landing gear now for his approach into, I think he's coming to Oban here. He always does everything by the book. We've actually got some of the checklists for the aircraft, and he likes to run through those in detail. So here he is on final now. I've seen this a few times recently in doing my training, and you've always got to get the right kind of impression. He's using the PAPI lights here to try and line himself up, but without those it makes it a little more difficult. In the Mirage, I think the audio is particularly impressive. You were talking about the vibration on the sun visors, the dials, the systems that you're using, the recreation, the detail and the texture quality, and in particular the quality of the shadows, so that you don't get those horrible kind of sawtooth effects that you see in some flight sims today. So it works particularly well. The aircraft are beautiful. You've mentioned having Orbex, FTX Global in there. That makes a massive difference to the quality of the world. The airports are something that we're looking to update over time, but I think there will be some key players that come in to help us accelerate that process. For us, it was about trying to concentrate on key areas of the sim. We don't have 1,000 people working on this, so you don't do everything overnight, but the things that you do concentrate on, you have to do to a very high degree of fidelity. And I think once people have got these aircrafts and this sim in their hands and they can see what we have focused on, they will get a taste of the improvements to come once we start focusing on other areas. So you can see him kind of taxiing off the runway here to parking. And this is another mission that he's working on. This is something called Impossible Turn. So one of the things that we did look at early on in development of Flight Sim was, what we don't ever want to do is turn this into a video game. It's not a game, it's a simulator, and we're trying to recreate the events and the scenarios that you can encounter as a pilot, be it a student pilot or highly qualified commercial pilot, and eventually ATPL when we look at airliners, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But we try to draw our inspiration from the real world. So it's not about creating really kind of silly gameplay scenarios. This is a simulator, and we want to draw inspiration from people's experiences, the things that pilots talk about in the real world. I spend hours and hours in the evenings kind of reading various materials. My girlfriend always says to me, "Oh, you're looking at YouTube videos of propellers again, or you're reading this, that and the other book." This stuff is just so compelling that you can't fail to find something really interesting from the real world and try to inject that into the simulator. So Impossible Turn is just one of those classic scenarios where every pilot fears on the climb out you get the engine failure after takeoff. And what we found is, in a lot of the studies that come back, that one of the things that pilots tend to do at that moment of drama is they panic. You don't expect to have that engine failure, you don't walk yourself through it on takeoff. So pilots have invariably tended to do the worst possible thing, which is on the engine failure they haven't got sufficient thrust, and they tend to pull back on the control stick or the yoke and actually pitch the plane up and lose even more speed. And it's really kind of fascinating to me. Maybe I'm geeking out now talking about all those details, but capturing those moments from the real world and putting them into the simulator so that people can experience it from themselves. And obviously it's very different in a simulator because you don't have that moment of panic. You know that you can restart it and replay it, which is a bit of a cheat. But actually we look at all of those things and we look at what we're doing with the profile and your history as a pilot. But it still takes some skill to do the right thing and recover the aircraft. So in Impossible Turn, one of the things that you're always told not to do is don't try and do a 180 and come back to the airport. You're trying to fly straight ahead, maintain control of the aircraft and put the aircraft down in a decent spot and walk away from it. So what we do, and now some of our missions really, is draw that inspiration from the real world and acknowledge people doing the right thing and almost kind of living to see another day and keeping the aircraft intact, and those things are cool. So even though they are relatively simple missions in that regard, actually it's fascinating watching the different results that people get.
And that is certainly something. The missions give a different aspect than taking things up in free flight from any of the 24,000 airports we have to choose from. It's a very different experience, and I know missions aren't for everyone, but things like those scenarios, like you say, the Impossible Turn, really you never want to do the Impossible Turn. But
I mean, free flight is amazing. You can always draw your own inspiration from that and recreate some amazing scenarios, or visit all the different airports, fly around your home area. People do that stuff all the time, and that's fantastic. But I still think there is a place for the right kind of mission content, authentic scenarios that you could find yourself in as a pilot. And sometimes those are a distraction. I spend the majority of my time in free flight, as I'm sure you do, but obviously having worked as a developer on this, I've played through all the missions, and some of the scenarios are particularly cool in my mind, and that's an area that I think we and other people can capitalise on in the future.
Okay, fantastic. So we're going to jump into some Q&A now.
Okay.
We've discussed some of the features. We've discussed the release date, which, if you're not aware, Flight Sim World is coming out on May 18th. And for those who are interested, it will be priced up at $19.99 in pounds and $24.99 in both euro and the US dollar. So depending on where you live, that's what you'll be able to pick up Flight Sim World for. Don't forget, if you haven't already, and if you have, please don't do it again, May 18, we'll be giving away 5 copies of Flight Sim World at the end of the Q&A.
Okay.
So, just I suppose a few things that we've been seeing the community asking over time is just in terms of VR support is one of the big contentious issues, I suppose, for a upcoming or for a new flight sim.
Yeah. So this is where you throw all those difficult community questions at me, isn't it, on a live stream, and answer them. So VR is something that, as developers, we're incredibly excited about, and we have a number of those systems and kits internally. Who doesn't like to play with new technology? And VR makes a huge difference to that sense of immersion in the experience for obvious reason. That isn't something that we're looking to proactively incorporate in Flight Sim World to begin with, because we take, I guess you could say, a very pragmatic view of that space and that opportunity right now. And when I was talking earlier about us trying to focus on key things so that we could really focus our efforts and elevate certain areas of the simulator above what has gone previously, taking on VR is something that you don't want to treat as a bolt-on. I don't really want to incorporate VR as just another little tick box and we've spent 5 minutes on it. We want to do that properly, and I think its time will come.
Okay, fantastic. Actually, a lot of questions as well about the kind of ATC that will feature, I mean, both at launch and I suppose in the future of early access.
Yes, so ATC and the radio comms and the general interaction with air traffic control in its various guises is something that we've not been looking to overhaul for early access. What we've been trying to do is modify the method of interaction with ATC so that it's more in fitting with our method of display and user interface, so that we can harness our ideas for the future for ATC. So I want to apply a massive overhaul to that system. I think the one that is in there for early access is okay, but I don't think the community would disagree with me here when I say that there's a lot more that should be done with it. So when we were looking at things like the impossible